The cameras rolled as Kash Patel stood behind the podium, the American flag draped ominously behind him. His voice was calm, calculated, almost rehearsed, as he addressed a global audience during a press briefing that was anything but ordinary. Africa must decide, Patel said with steely resolve, his gaze fixed on the camera lens like it was an adversary. Submit to the order we built, or vanish from the game altogether. The world has no room for rogue actors anymore. The statement echoed across international news networks within minutes. Social media lit up like wildfire. Hashtags erupted, hashtag submit or perish, hashtag New World Order, hashtag Africa Speaks. In some corners, the speech was hailed as a warning shot from a confident superpower. In others, it was seen as a direct insult, dripping with neo-colonial arrogance. But in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, a different kind of silence fell, a silence before the storm. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat in a dimly lit war room, surrounded by maps, dusty folders, and the hum of encrypted devices. His expression was unreadable as he replayed Patel's words again and again. Around him, his advisors exchanged glances. Everyone knew a response was coming, but only Traoré knew what kind. Finally, he stood. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his fist. He simply said, "Then let them know, we don't vanish, we ignite." He turned to his chief strategist. "Get the camera crew. I have something to say to the world." Within the hour, the same platforms that had broadcast Patel's veiled ultimatum were now lighting up with Traoré's unflinching gaze. "You say we must submit or disappear," he said into the camera, his voice like iron. "Only cowards vanish. And I assure you, I am still here." Then he leaned slightly forward. "You want a new world order? Then be ready to face the new world." The world braced for what came next. The video of Ibrahim Traoré's reply traveled faster than anyone anticipated. Within hours, it was the #1 trending clip across platforms, broadcast, dissected, and memed. But beneath the internet frenzy, geopolitical pressure was mounting like a rising tide. In Washington, D.C., Kash Patel was in a closed-door meeting with top defense and intelligence officials. He slammed his fist on the conference table, frustration cutting through his usually composed demeanor. "Who does this man think he is?" he spat. "This isn't just defiance, it's a declaration." "Or inspiration," murmured an analyst, almost too quietly. Patel's head snapped toward the voice. "Inspiration," he said slowly. "To whom?" "To every leader sick of bending the knee," the analyst replied. "To the global south. To everyone watching Traoré stand up to the so-called order and realizing, maybe they can, too." Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Traoré wasn't seeking viral fame. He was preparing for fallout. Maps of mineral-rich zones were spread out before him: cobalt, gold, lithium, uranium. All marked, all protected. "They want our land for what's under it," he said. "But they forget who's standing on it." One of his aides stepped forward. "Washington just pushed an emergency summit. They want sanctions." Traoré chuckled. "Let them sanction the soil if they dare." At that moment, a message buzzed in on a secure line. It was from a neighboring African president: "Stand firm. We're watching. We're ready." Traoré looked up, eyes steeled. "Then let them watch me build what they fear, a continent that kneels to no empire." Across the Atlantic, Patel sat in silence, watching the latest footage of Traoré addressing a rally. The words cut deep, not just as rhetoric, but as resistance. "You can take our gold," Traoré declared, "but you'll never wear our pride." The crowd roared, and the world listened. Kash Patel took to the airwaves. In an interview with a major U.S. network, he leaned forward with calculated intensity. "Let's be absolutely clear," he began, "Africa's resources are not just African concerns, they're global assets. Stability demands structure, and structure demands leadership." The anchor nodded cautiously. "Are you saying the U.S. should intervene?" "I'm saying," Patel said, glancing into the camera, "that if Africa won't regulate its assets, others will step in. It's a matter of global economic security." Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré replayed the clip in silence. His inner circle was tense, eyes flickering with rage, confusion, pride. Then Traoré spoke, calm but sharp as a blade: "So the leash speaks now." Laughter broke out in the room, not from mockery, but from recognition. They call it global assets, he continued, but what they mean is conquest rebranded. Theft in a tailored suit. He paused, then turned to a map showing key gold and lithium zones. They want these, he said, tapping the board. They don't want us. They don't need our consent. But they will fear our presence. His media advisor stepped in. Sir, should we respond publicly? Traoré nodded. Prepare a message, not to Kash, to the world. That evening, across social platforms and media outlets, a video went viral. In it, Traoré stood in front of a rust-colored monument built by African revolutionaries. He spoke plainly. You speak of order, but deliver chaos. You claim stewardship, but sow dependence. You threaten intervention, but forget, this is not the Africa you used to know. He paused. If Kash Patel wants our minerals, he'll have to mine through our history first. And history doesn't forget. Especially not the blood in the soil. Viewers around the world leaned in. The fire had been lit. Inside a private conference room in Washington, the atmosphere was electric. Kash Patel, flanked by former intelligence officers and high-level energy lobbyists, tapped his pen against a thick dossier marked, Confidential, African Mineral Strategy. A map of West Africa was projected on the screen, with Burkina Faso highlighted in red. A retired general leaned in. He's gaining traction, Kash. This Traoré, he's not just a local anomaly anymore. He's a movement. Patel didn't blink. And movements can be redirected, or dismantled. Another advisor chimed in. We've secured contracts with neighboring states. If Traoré won't play ball, we'll build a wall around him. Economically, militarily if needed. Kash smirked. He wants to nationalize. Let's see how long he lasts when no one buys his gold. Halfway across the globe, Traoré stood in a school courtyard. Children ran past him, waving hand-drawn flags of Burkina Faso. One little girl handed him a flower. He knelt, took it, and smiled. But his phone buzzed. A message from his advisor. U.S. intel intercepts suggest economic siege being planned. Names include Patel, regional intermediaries, and corporate allies. Traoré stood slowly. The smile faded. Later that night, in a secure chamber beneath the presidential palace, Traoré met with his closest generals, economic advisors, and cybersecurity experts. They want to starve us into submission, his finance minister said. Through sanctions, proxy deals, and media war. Traoré scanned the room. Let them come, he said. But we will not kneel. Not for their dollars. Not for their threats. Let us weaponize truth. His tech advisor nodded. We can leak their playbook. Show the people who pulls the strings. And the world, Traoré added, will see Africa is not a chessboard, but a lion's den. Across the dark web, encrypted files began to circulate. Code names, communications, economic sabotage plans. Slowly, the narrative began to shift. And in the halls of American power, Kash Patel realized the battlefield had moved, and Traoré wasn't backing down. As daylight filtered through the red dust of Ouagadougou, Traoré sat at the head of a long oak table, surrounded by technologists, whistleblowers, and journalists. The leaked intel had detonated across African media like a bomb, Patel's strategies exposed, complete with names, timestamps, and chilling projections of mineral exploitation cloaked as stabilization. Let them spin it, Traoré said calmly, but we speak with proof now. Across Africa, young voices echoed his sentiment. Hashtags like #HandsOffAfrica and #Burkina Unchained flooded every platform. In Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, and even in corners of South Africa, students marched with printed images of the leaked dossier. Patel's name had become synonymous with neo-colonial ambition. But in D.C., the counteroffensive had begun. Kash Patel appeared on cable news, brushing off the leaks as fabricated Russian disinfo, while smiling too tightly. We're helping African nations stabilize their economies, he insisted. We're the good guys. Yet Traoré's next move wasn't reactive, it was proactive. We're launching Project Sankofa, he told his cabinet, a coalition of nations, built on transparency, digital sovereignty, and shared ownership of our resources. In a massive hall in Bamako, surrounded by leaders from 7 West African countries, Traoré took the podium. The world watched via live stream. No foreign consultant, he declared, no hedge fund, no retired general will tell us what our gold is worth, or what our lives are worth. He held up the American dossier for all to see. This was their plan, he thundered. To divide us with deals, drown us in loans, and dig out our soil. But this is our line in the sand. Meanwhile, Patel's team scrambled to launch counter-narratives. Anonymous think tanks began pushing reports discrediting Traoré. US-backed media outlets aired pieces about security concerns in Burkina Faso, hinting at terrorist sympathies. But the damage was done. Traoré had shifted the playing field, again. The story was no longer just about him. It was about African sovereignty versus Western manipulation. And as one viral clip showed, a young girl, standing atop a jeep in Ouagadougou, shouted into a megaphone. "We're not poor, we're being robbed." The crowd roared, and somewhere behind closed doors in Washington, Kash Patel understood, this wasn't just about gold anymore. In a stark white room beneath the Capitol, Kash Patel paced slowly, his face lit by the glow of multiple screens showing African news channels. Every one of them bore one name on their lower thirds, Traoré. "This man's become a brand," one aide muttered. "Not just a leader." "No," Patel corrected him coldly. "He's become a problem." The leak hadn't just caused embarrassment, it had threatened interests. Trillions in projected mineral wealth, years of strategic positioning, a dozen partnerships with private contractors and energy multinationals, all now under scrutiny, thanks to a populist soldier with a spine of iron and a voice that resonated far beyond his borders. So the U.S. response escalated. Digital campaigns were greenlit. Patel authorized influence operations targeting West African youth, cloaked under NGO fronts and education initiatives. The goal, reshape public perception, paint Traoré as dangerous, unstable, authoritarian. They underestimated how connected Africa had become. In Ouagadougou, Traoré met with cyber experts from Kenya and Nigeria. "Let them try," he said. "But we will fight misinformation like we fight occupation, relentlessly." He launched Truthfire, a real-time counter-disinformation task force broadcasting across social platforms in multiple languages. Its content was bold, naming lobbyists, exposing deals, confronting hypocrisy. One campaign video even featured a split screen, on the left, Patel declaring Africa must align with democratic values, on the right, footage of exploited mines in Congo guarded by American-funded mercenaries. Traoré knew he was playing a dangerous game. One night, his intelligence chief placed a folder on his desk. It contained intercepted chatter. An assassination plot. Washington's fingerprints were buried beneath layers of proxies. But the message was clear: remove the symbol, and the resistance falls. Traoré closed the folder slowly. "They think we are afraid to die," he said, voice steady. "But they forget, we've been dying under them for centuries. Now, we fight to live." The room fell silent. Outside, a storm gathered over the Capitol. But the streets pulsed with chants, not of fear, but of defiance. And halfway across the world, in Washington, a man named Patel realized, the fire he helped ignite, might not be containable anymore. Kash Patel sat in a darkened war room, eyes fixed on the flurry of reports streaming in from West Africa. Satellite imagery showed rallies unlike anything the region had seen, flags bearing Traoré's insignia waved across rooftops, young people sang freedom anthems in local dialects, and murals of colonial chains being shattered covered once blank walls. "This isn't just resistance," a Pentagon advisor muttered. "It's revolution." Patel didn't blink. And revolutions can be crushed. But every action they took only seemed to pour gasoline on the flames. The IMF had frozen development loans. The U.S. State Department issued travel warnings, effectively choking off tourism. Even private security firms had been deployed to protect American interests. But Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped in front of international cameras and held up a small gold coin. This, he said, is the real reason they are here. Not for our peace. Not for our prosperity. But for this. For our gold, our cobalt, our lithium, our future. Then he threw it into a furnace behind him. We will not sell our dignity, not for dollars, not for threats, not for fear. The footage went viral within hours. From Rio to Riyadh, his words resonated with the disillusioned and the colonized. Even in parts of Europe, protests broke out under banners reading, "Traoré was right." And Washington? It panicked. Kash authorized an elite information warfare unit to fabricate a video of Traoré meeting with hostile foreign actors. But within 48 hours, it was exposed, by a teenage coder from Senegal live streaming the deepfakes breakdown on Twitch. In response, Traoré posted only one sentence. They lied because the truth is lethal to them. Later that night, Traoré sat with his most trusted aides. His voice was calm, measured. They will come harder now. Drones. Sanctions. Maybe even invasion. An aide looked up. Should we dial it back? No, Traoré said, standing. You don't smother a fire by blowing on it. He stepped outside onto the presidential balcony. Below, a sea of people chanted his name. But Traoré's gaze was fixed far beyond the crowd, toward a continent still half asleep, and a world now forced to watch it wake up. The sun beat down on Ouagadougou, but inside the government compound, the temperature was ice cold. A diplomat from the European Union had just stormed out, his parting words still echoing in the hall. Africa cannot isolate itself from the global order. Traoré had simply smiled. Then maybe it's time the global order met a new continent. That afternoon, Kash Patel doubled down. A U.S. envoy arrived bearing a formal notice. The United States was activating economic retaliation under the guise of security stabilization. Every American corporation with assets or mining stakes in Burkina Faso was ordered to halt operations. Swift banking restrictions followed. But the response from the African bloc stunned Washington. Not only did neighboring nations refuse to condemn Burkina Faso, they began forming their own union. Not just economically, but militarily. Mali, Niger, and Guinea issued a joint statement. Any aggression against one of us will be considered aggression against us all. Patel was livid. Traoré is turning Africa into a weapon. But Traoré, speaking to a sea of reporters in a dusty courtyard, dismissed the fearmongering. I am not creating enemies, he said. They're simply revealing themselves. In a moment that would become symbolic, he walked barefoot onto a carved stone stage, holding a fistful of rich, red earth. He raised it above his head and said, This belongs to no foreign flag. No distant banker. No general in a faraway land. It belongs to the children born on it, the mothers who feed it, the warriors who defend it. He crushed the soil in his fist, then let it fall through his fingers like sand. You can't sanction dust. You can't embargo a soul. It was the speech that broke the algorithm. Platforms across the internet were flooded with remixes, animations, and reaction videos. African youth worldwide began recording themselves picking up soil, mimicking Traoré's gesture, posting with the hashtag #OurLandOurLaw. Back in Washington, Patel was urged to consider direct intervention. But the CIA's own internal report warned. Traoré has become a symbol now. Removing him would not stop the movement, it would ignite it. In an emergency meeting, Patel slammed his hand on the table. Then we bury the symbol before it buries us. But in Africa, they were already digging, with shovels of memory, sweat, and rebellion. Washington was scrambling. Kash Patel had authorized an unprecedented move. Covert operatives were dispatched to West Africa under the guise of humanitarian aid. Their objective? Destabilize the growing alliance Traoré had orchestrated. But there was a flaw in the plan. Traoré anticipated every step. While Patel pushed sanctions, Traoré pushed speeches, not from gilded podiums, but from the dirt roads of villages, under trees, in front of burning oil lamps. He didn't talk like a president. He talked like a brother, a son, a soldier. They're not scared of our guns, he told a crowd in Bobo Dioulasso. They're scared of our unity. Back in D.C., intelligence reports painted a grim picture. Traoré's approval ratings across the Sahel were rising faster than any Western-backed leader. But what alarmed Kash Patel most wasn't the numbers. It was the symbolism. A new flag had begun circulating online. Black, green, and gold, with a lion in chains breaking free. No stars. No eagles. No Western homage. It was the flag of an idea, the decolonized continent. In a televised press briefing, Patel tried to downplay the movement. Africa is not ready to lead itself, he said, smirking. It still needs adult supervision. The clip was played endlessly. Within hours, Traoré's response went viral. If you think we're children, he said, then understand this, we're the kind that burn down the orphanage and build our own home. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The crowd around him erupted. The internet melted. In Paris, Macron looked uneasy. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu called for strategic alignment. In Riyadh, silence. Even in Beijing, the message was clear, the old Africa was gone. From the Sahara to the swamps, murals began appearing on walls. Traoré's profile facing forward, with the caption. No more puppets. No more masters. Patel, watching from a CIA back room, leaned back in his chair and muttered. He's not just building a nation, he's building a legend. And for the first time, the West didn't know how to fight that. Weeks after Patel's demeaning remarks, a secret summit convened in an underground bunker in Ouagadougou. The leaders of Mali, Guinea, and Niger stood beside Traoré, not as subordinates, but as equals. What brought them together wasn't just political strategy. It was dignity. The chains they placed on our ancestors, Traoré said, we now melt into swords. Meanwhile, Patel appeared before Congress to rally support for a renewed military presence in West Africa. We're not losing to Traoré, he insisted, we're just recalibrating. But the air in the chamber was thick with unease. His words lacked fire. The myth of invincibility was cracking. Global media had shifted. For the first time in decades, the West wasn't the center of the story. Africa was. Not as a backdrop, but as the stage. Back home, Traoré wasn't broadcasting threats or issuing long-winded manifestos. He walked markets, sat with elders, met barefoot kids under mango trees. Cameras caught moments, unfiltered, raw, real. And those images traveled faster than any drone or diplomat. He's not playing their game, said a young journalist from Ghana. He flipped the board. In retaliation, Patel pushed for freezing African assets. But the continent had already begun switching trade lines, bypassing the West. Alternative alliances, once theoretical, were now practical. African nations traded resources for tech, not debt. One night, in a BBC interview, Traoré was asked if he feared assassination. He smiled. You don't fear lightning when you are the storm. That line spread like wildfire. Murals changed again, no longer just his face, but a storm cloud behind him, lightning striking chains. The message, Africa wasn't asking for independence. It was claiming it. And far away, in a New York office, Kash Patel stared out the window, phone silent. No one was calling. No more strategies. No more leverage. Just one cold realization. They didn't lose control of Africa. Africa finally realized it never needed them.